2019. Here we all are together. My name is Laura MacDonald. I'll be managing this venue over the next 5 wonderful days, along with my colleague Sujata and our wonderful volunteers who, if you need anything, please do ask them. We have a few announcements just to make before we start the session this morning. I just wanted to say, please, if you could all, first of all, turn your phones to silent. It's very disrespectful to the writers to just forget to turn them off onto silent, but if you do have a really, really urgent conversation, please just take it outside, just as a matter of respect. That would be very much appreciated. If you could also, please don't leave any bags unattended, just for security issues. That will make a big difference to everybody in terms of something being left behind and then causing a security alert. So please just don't leave any bags unattended. And we would be so, so grateful if the tent does get particularly full, if there is somebody who's elderly or in need of assistance, if you could give up your seat for them, we would be so grateful. That would be very kind. So no flash photography. If you could be, just be aware of that. Turn your flashes off. And if you could keep the aisles free, that would be fantastic. And if you are involved with social media, if you could tweet hashtag ZJLF2019 or handle @ZJLF, any photos or comments, we would love you to be a part of that thread. If there's an emergency, there is a gate not far from here. It is called the Sangram Colony Gate, but you would basically go out and make a left-hand turn, and it is actually parallel with the main Diggy entrance. So if there's any problems, please, we will direct you to the Sangam Colony Gate. This is also very important that we're creating a safe space here for everybody at the festival to enjoy themselves. So if there's any problems with harassment, it will not be tolerated, and there are police stationed and there's around the festival, and there is a help desk at the entrance, so feel free, if you do feel strongly, to go and report something to them. On a more happy note, there is a festival bazaar and the pool bazaar going on with artisans, craftspeople, young entrepreneurs, and we'd love you to help us support them. And that's on from 9 till 6 every day. But at the evening, we have a brand new, night market. Now, this is on every night at the music stage between 5 and 11 p.m., so please do support that if you feel. And the Jaipur music stage has amazing, amazing musicians on every night, and that is at Clark's Amer Hotel, and that will be from 5 p.m. onwards every night. So please do go and enjoy the music when you've had your fill of wonderful literature and poetry and whatever it is that you may be enjoying during the day. Okay, so this brings me to our session. I am very, very excited to begin our first session here with a wonderful topic. Can you imagine a world without bees? I hope none of us can. We are presenting today a wonderful author, Maja Lunde, in conversation with Pradip Krishen. It's presented by our sponsor, Bazaar. Thank you so much to our sponsors for their support. So both authors will be signing their books afterwards. If you did want to go and buy a book and have it signed, the author signing is the table just at the top of the ramp as you exit the venue. Now, I'd love to tell you just a quick little bit about our two guests today. First of all, our moderator is Pradip Krishen, and he is a writer who has restored many degraded landscapes, including the Rao Jodhra Desert Rock Park in Jaipur and the Kishan Bagh in Jaipur, here in Jaipur where we are today. And he's also the author of a wonderful book, Trees of Delhi, and also Jungle Trees of Central India. And he will be in conversation with the wonderful author, Maja Lunde. Now, her first novel, The History of Bees, was a global success and the best-selling book in any genre in Germany in 2017. And that was for more than 90 consecutive weeks that it was on the German Bestseller list. Her sequel, the book Blue, will also be translated worldwide, and she's written several books for children and young adults, as well as film and TV scripts. So I will now hand over to our moderator and our wonderful author. Thank you for your time and attention. And we will have time at the end for questions. We'll only have 10 minutes, so if you could just keep your comments and questions as brief as possible so we can then get around to a few people, that would be most kind. Please enjoy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first session here, and welcome, Maja, to India and to JLF.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing to us this wonderful book that I read with so much enjoyment. One of the things that struck me first when I was reading it, Maja, was this. Your book begins in the year 2098, almost a century from now. And there's this very unsettling account of people in China sitting up and hand-pollinating trees because there are no bees left. It's a very, very frightening scene because you have all these people who are being closely supervised, hand-pollinating every single flower that they have, because there is nothing left to pollinate them. And you say something, if I'm quoting you right, you say, being pioneers in pollution, we became excellent at pollination. And my thought first went, my God, if there are pioneers in pollution, maybe it's us rather than the Chinese. But it was fascinating to see this very bleak picture of what the future might look like. Do you want to elaborate on that and what, how you think of China in the future?
Well, I started with a question for this future scenario, which is approximately 1/3 of the book. And the question was, how will the world be without bees? And as you probably know, the bees don't only give us honey, but they also give us most of our vegetables and fruits and cotton and alfalfa, which cows eat, for example. A lot of plants, for a lot of plants, we need them to pollinate to get the stuff we eat. So a world without bees is a very bleak world. And then I started to research, and I saw several documentaries about colony collapse disorder and the fact that the bees are actually threatened. They are disappearing all over the world, and all kind of insects are. For example, in Germany, they have had like 70% decline of wild insects for the last 15 years. 75%, that's dramatic. And then I found a story about China, about the Sichuan province in China. They actually lost their bees in the 1980s due to pesticides. And they have a big fruit industry there, but all the pollinating insects were gone, so they were actually forced to climb up into the trees and hand pollinate and brush the flowers with the pollen. And it proved quite efficient, actually. The trees gave a lot of fruit, so they continued doing that, even though the insects eventually came back. And they still do. So if you Google hand pollination China, you will see some really scary but also beautiful pictures of people in the trees with small brushes hand pollinating. And there I had the start for my novel, and therefore my novel is set in China, and therefore China who was and are still pollinating a lot now, having a lot of pollution also, were pioneers in pollination.
there are actually three separate strands in time to Maja's novel. One is China in 2098. One is Middle America in 1851, is it? 1851.
51, 52.
And the third is England, roughly contemporary. But the Chinese story actually has a very interesting twist, because a young boy goes with his parents to the edge of a forest, and he disappears around the corner, and he gets bitten by a bee, gets stung by a bee, and he goes into anaphylactic shock and is whisked away and taken away to hospital and then disappears. And the mother then follows him to Beijing. And the image of Beijing in the future is also very, very frightening. Do you relate what is happening in Beijing to the bees at all?
Well, this is supposed. It's been a collapse, because when the pollinating insects disappear, people don't have enough food anymore, and everything sort of breaks down, and people are forced to move to the countryside and be farmers to actually have not enough to eat, and technology and everything is just. It's a post-technological society, and big cities also break down. So this is the deserted city in the future, and it's a scary place. Yes. So it was kind of if the insects disappear, these kinds of scenarios will. I mean, it was about looking at how the smallest things on Earth are so important to us, and we seldom realize. We just take them for granted, all these elements of the planet that are working all the time. They are working, and we don't see it, and we don't really appreciate it, but we need them. Without them, we are actually doomed.
You know, we heard a very scary story in India about a large consignment of honey that was sent from China to Germany about 8 years ago. And most European countries now have very stringent testing of honey for antibiotics. They don't permit antibiotics above a certain level to enter their country. And the Chinese honey was tested, and it was found to be several times higher than the permissible limit of antibiotics. And so the Germans said, you have to take this back. We're not going to accept this honey. And the Chinese said, any takers for some cheap honey? Guess where the honey went? It came here. It was bought by an unnamed Indian company, and this honey is now circulating and probably irrigating our digestive system. So it's a very, very frightening scenario. Coming back to England, contemporary England in your novel, and
contemporary U.S.
Sorry, contemporary U.S. and England, 1851. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you have this surprise connection between the two that you make sort of halfway through the book, but do you want to just talk about that a little bit?
Well, I don't want to spoil all the connections, actually, since people might want to read the book. But, well, this is the past story is actually started with a question too. How did we get where we are today? How come the world is? How come we're facing these issues, and how come we are not able to take better care of our planets and care of our insects? And to look to try to answer, I went back in time to the start of modern beekeeping. And there is my story. It's about William. He's a biologist, and he lives in the UK in 1851-52. And he is very depressed in the beginning of the novel because he feels he hasn't done anything with his life. He has had so high hopes for himself, and he's sort of a proud guy. And he didn't do anything except get a lot of daughters, which has no value or to him back, or so he thought. And then he decides to invent a new kind of beehive. And he hopes this invention will make him famous. And he actually, well, this beehive will turn up later in the story, but I don't want to spoil too. No. So that's his project, is to invent this beehive. And I actually was very inspired by the father of beekeeping, Lorenzo Langstroth. So William is sort of making the same invention as he did. And it's about his struggle to try to make this invention, but also very much to cope with his family and connect with his children, because he's not the best father around.
So, you know, throughout the novel, there's this wonderful weaving of these 3 different time scales and 3 different families. Sometimes you actually have to, you know, try and keep up with what's going on where. But one of the other themes, Maja, that you do so brilliantly in your book is it has to do with relationships within the family, parents and children. And sometimes, perhaps the most difficult ones are the connections between fathers and sons. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, and why you are so interested in that?
I think the relationship between parents and children, for me, it is the most interesting relationship to write about. I have 3 children myself, 3 boys. They are 8, 10, and 14. So this is something I know. I think about this relationship, obviously, as we do as parents every day. And it can sometimes be really hard to be a parent. You want what is best for your children, but you don't always know what that is. And you think with yourself in the center instead of trying to see the child, and realizing that what is best for your child isn't necessarily what would have been best for you when you were little or now. And that the children have to find their own path. So all the 3 stories are about parents who really, really want what's best for their children, but they can't figure out what that is, because they see the child from their own angle, not from. They don't see the world from the child's angle. And one other thing I also find interesting with this relationship is that children grow all the time, and that means we as parents have to try to change with them, because they change, and we have to try to change with them somehow, and that's really difficult. They are different persons. Almost every day there's a new person there. And compared to a love relationship, for example, which can be kind of stable for years and years and years, doesn't really changing that much. But with children, it's changing every day, and I find that really fascinating. And it also sometimes makes it very hard to be a parent. It's like you were this happy little boy yesterday, and now you're this gloomy teenagers with feelings I don't understand at all.
Tell us how you started researching this book, and how did it grow into a novel?
Well, it's actually started. I had been writing several children books, and also, as you said, I've been a screenwriter for a few years, and then I started to try to write a novel. But none of the themes I worked with really engaged me. And then one day I saw a documentary about colony collapse disorder and about the fact that the bees are disappearing. And I was immediately extremely fascinated by the life inside of the beehive, which is very complex and very fascinating. And also, I was very fascinated about the importance of these small insects and how much we depend upon them. but I was also very scared. First of all, realizing that these small insects are threatened as they are, and then looking into this scenario where they actually could disappear. That was really, really scary. And from the very beginning also, I got the idea for these three characters, for Tao in the future, for William in England in the 1852, and for George, who is a beekeeper in Ohio in 2007. And I just wanted to get to know them as characters, as people, and I started to dive into their minds, so to speak, and try to find their voices, because they all have very, it's 3 first-person stories, and they all have their very specific voice. And that was how I got to know them, actually, was trying to find those different voices and find out who they are through how they express themselves and how they think.
So did you actually travel to Ohio and to England and spend time?
I had traveled to England, and I had been to the US first. Yeah, but I didn't travel to China in the future. No, I didn't.
Tell us a little bit about your plans for your next novel, and how because you are planning to expand this into a much larger tapestry.
Yes, this is actually the first book of a quartet, the first of 4 books, and the second book is already out in several countries. It's called Blue, or Blå in Norwegian. The English title will be The End of the Ocean, and I think it will be out here in the end of 2019 or maybe early 2020. I'm not sure yet. But it will come on the two more. It's about water. It's about lack of water. It's set in Norway in 2017, and it's also go back in time to Norway, to the start of building the modern Norway. It has a lot of fjords, glaciers, nature. The Norwegian nature is very important in that book. We have a lot of water in Norway. It's about hydroelectricity, about putting rivers into pipes. And it has also a story from the future. It's set in 2041, and it's in a drought-ridden southern Europe in France. There has been drought for several years. We haven't been able to stop global warming, and we now see the results of that. So all over Southern Europe, people are fleeing, and it's about a young dad and his little daughter escaping fire and drought and trying to connect with the rest of the family. And it's also a very bleak scenario.
But
And,
these are some of the biggest environmental, ecological themes in the world today. I mean, we are, clearly hugely interested in the whole issue of water. And everybody's predicting that all the wars in the future are going to be about access to water, because that's going to be the one commodity that is going to be in short supply.
It's the most important thing we have. I guess that's why the Norwegian title is Blå, blue. It's the color of water. And one of the main characters, when she's little, she thinks she doesn't understand why the world is called the Earth, because our planet, because it should be called the water. And when you see the planet from above, it's blue. We live on the blue planet, but still, not, as you say, fresh water is a resource we get less and less of, and it's really terrifying when you start to look at it. And what I also found really scary with it's the same future as the history of bees. So these books are connected, and it's a big jigsaw puzzle with a lot of pieces. And in the third novel, which I'm trying to finish these days, we will actually meet again some of the characters from the second novel, and in the fourth book I will connect all stories if I can I mean, it's a big, I still hope I can manage, but I'll really try. So, and I guess for me the books are like the planet. Everything is connected to everything, so the stories are all connected.
So do you feel like talking about number 3 and number 4, or not? Is
Well,
it too early?
I can say a little bit about it. Number 3 will be about endangered animals. And it will be about the human animal. We are animals too, and we tend to forget that. We set ourselves above all other species on the planet and find ourselves better than them. But we are just one of them, actually. And it will be set in Russia in 1882, and in Mongolia in 1992, and in Norway in 2064. And the fourth book will be about, which I know you are interested in, everything that grows, everything that's green, plants, trees, seed. So, and it will be set after the history of bees, the future story, so there it all will all be connected.
How long will we survive as a race? The human beings.
I don't want to answer that. No, but one can definitely question it. Yes, yes.
So
we are not doing our best to survive.
So this is an absolutely huge canvas, Maja, huge. I mean, it's
Yes.
massive. And you've been a screenwriter, a film writer. Are you converting these, any of them into? Are you hoping to make some of them into films?
I am. I will sell the rights to the whole quartet. Yes, I am in a process of doing that. But it's still not official, so don't tell anyone.
But
But it's.
but the writer will still be you, will it?
No, I don't.
Oh.
I will not write.
You won't
No,
write.
it's too much, because it will be a series. And to write a series, usually they use several screenwriters, and it's a full job for years and years to come. So I really have to prioritize writing the books. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the business of, writing your first novel and then going through the business of becoming a celebrated novelist who's translated into all these languages. How many of the translations were you actually able to read yourself and evaluate and influence?
Well, I'm only able to read English, Danish, and Swedish. So yeah, then there's 32 languages left, which I'm not able to read. And I just have to trust the translation, the publishing houses and the translators, and hope they do their best to take care of these 3 different voices and to try to... Norwegian is a very flexible language with a lot of choices when it comes to grammar. And in other languages, you have to find another way to do that. So I have to trust that, the translations actually do that in a good way for their language.
And the first language was German that it got translated into, was
No,
it?
the first was actually Polish.
It was Polish.
Yeah.
But Germany was the big place where the novel
Germany
made
has
its...
been, and Poland too, and a lot of other countries. It has done very well. So it's and this is of course the book. The book definitely changed my life, and I think being able to speak about this theme and the immense issues we're dealing with right now in so many countries make me really grateful. So I feel like the book is more than the book. It's more than a personal success. For me, it's to be able to do that, to go around and talk to media about the big issues we're dealing with today, it really makes me grateful.
I can't really think of too many fictionalized works that deal with these themes in the English language. there's a lot of documentary work and a lot of scientific work, but the fact that that this is fiction and that it's been received so widely and so avidly does say something about people's, desire to listen, to hear these things,
I
and
think so
understand
too.
them.
And when I was writing it, I was like, I'm probably the only one who finds this interesting. And I just wrote it because I really needed to write it. It was like when I first got the idea for the book, it was no turning back. I just had an enormous energy and I was diving into it. I had to do a tremendous lot of research for the book because it's so filled with facts. And I had not only about bees and beekeeping, which I didn't know anything about when I started, but also, how did they live in England in 1852? What kind of, all these small details. The main character, he has a cup on his table. What is it made of? Is it made of tin? Is it made of glass? All these kinds of small, devil is in the details,
That's right.
So, but I learned a lot from that too. And I think that people are interested and they want to learn more. And looking at insects, for me at least, and I think a lot of readers also feel the same, and they tell me they feel the same, that climate changes and environmental issues can feel a bit abstract. It can feel like something that isn't close to us. But insects, we have them in our own garden. The birds we'll listen to right now, they eat insects. They are here all the time. And it's something you see and hear all the time, and it's very close. And so I think that's also some part of why people could relate to it somehow.
Last week, somebody sent me a Facebook post by a Danish writer. And the Danish writer was saying that, we used to drive a particular stretch near the ocean, and our windscreens would be covered with insects that had come and dashed themselves against the windscreen and died. And he said this used to be 20 years ago, but now we have clean windscreens.
Yes.
And obviously this was a lament. But to what extent, Maja, are you hopeful that we will be able to find solutions to all these desperately huge, problems?
I'm hopeful or optimistic every second day, and I'm pessimistic every second day. After the latest report, the latest UN report that came before Christmas, it felt bleak, because we now have only 11 years to stop global warming. And we really need to do so much more than we do. And that's, so I feel my pessimism is rising, unfortunately, but I'd still try to keep my hope and try to look at all the good things that actually happen. And also, I think the biggest question for these books, the whole 4 books, it's about us, it's about the human animal. And I'm trying to look at us and see, and I don't have the answer, but I wonder what in us made us able to be, to rule the world like we do, and be above all other species. And is there something in us that we can also use to save the planet? Do we have it? Or are we just too driven by our instinct who tells us that we should just, get more and more because we are still hunters and collectors somehow in our brain? Is that all that drives us, or do we have it in us to be wise enough and smart enough to actually to deal with this problem in a good way, and to realize we are not the only one living here? I don't have the answer.
I agree with you completely. I think that part of the problem is that when these questions are posed as huge abstract questions, they're also that much more difficult to grasp and therefore address. And when you fictionalize it and make it about people and their lives, that's that much easier to understand. So for all the young people in the audience, I hope you buy this book and read it, because it really is about very, very important things for our time. We're going to open up now to the audience for questions. So anybody who would like to ask Maja a question, 10 more minutes before questions. I'm sorry, yes.
Okay. It's okay if you open up.
It's okay to open up?
Yeah.
Okay, we will open up now then. So do we have a mic that will go around if necessary? All right. Anything else you want to talk about, Maja, while we get the mics ready?
Well, I didn't say much about George. He's the
About George,
last character of the novel. And he is a beekeeper in Ohio in 2007. And in 2007, this colony collapse disorder actually got its name, because then beekeepers all over the United States started to lose their bees. And the bees didn't just disappear over some time, they disappeared overnight. So you can have this good working beehive one day, and the second day the beekeeper would open it and the bees would all be gone. And the only one left would be the larvae and the queen. So the worker bees actually left mother and the babies. And they still haven't completely figured out why this is happening, but they think it might be pesticides changing the navigation system of the bees, because they are extremely good at that navigation. They can fly for kilometers a day and still find their way back to the bees, to the hive. So this third story is about a beekeeper who are in the beginning he are afraid his hives will also be infected. I won't spoil too much, of course, but yeah, he will have a disaster in his life. And it's also very much about him and his only son. He wants his son to take over the farm and be a beekeeper like he is, and his father were before him. But his son wants education, and he wants to go to a higher level education and have a degree and do something completely else. And that's really hard for George. So it's definitely a story about thinking you know what is best for your child when you don't really do.
So the word collapse actually applies to all four of your books, doesn't it? I mean, you could almost call the series a collapse series.
Well,
because it's about the collapse of everything that is needed to support life on Earth.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what has also changed since I started to write this book in 2013 is that we are starting to feel the collapse. So my second novel I wrote, we had an extremely dry summer in Europe last year with a lot of fires, and all kind of heat records were set. And I think if I had that summer when I wrote my second novel, the one about water, I'd probably changed it. So my books are actually changing because of what is happening already. And it's really scary. When I started, it felt like something in the future, and now it suddenly feels like something that's already here.
Already here, yes.
Yeah.
All right. In the audience, anybody who wants to ask a question? Okay. Can you speak slowly and clearly, please?
Good morning, ma'am. Good morning, sir. My question is to ma'am. Ma'am, as a thinker, as a writer, what do you think we as humans can do to maintain a balance, maintain a harmony with the creatures around us?
Well, we can all do a lot. And that is something I hold on to when I'm pessimistic, that we can take care of our local environment. We can look at ourselves, how we deal with our waste. we shouldn't eat much meat. The meat industry is a part of this. Not fly too much. In Norway, we had we have a lot of electrical cars coming now. That's a good thing for pollution. And we can also all look at what we can do in our local community. What can we do where we work? If we are leading someone, can we do something to make our job a green place? Can we tell our workers not to fly that much, for example? Can we look at the lunch? Is it vegetarian? So I think we can all try to do something. And have bees, of course, in our garden.
One of the most alarming things for me about the political process in India is that not a single political party that I know of has any aspect of the environment or of ecology as part of their manifesto. And I think that if we as individuals put pressure on the government to say, look, where are the environmental issues in your manifestos? This is a beginning. Next question.
Hi, good morning. I'm just a little curious to know that why have you chosen these particular years and places like 1992 Mongolia and 1851 England? Is there a reason behind these years and the places?
Yes, in my first novel, 1851-52, that is because I am very much inspired by the actual invention of the first beehive, the first modern beehive. So I put, and this a quite similar beehive was actually invented from several people at the same time back then, but they didn't know about each other because, I mean, communication wasn't the same as it is today. So, but my story is inspired by from the story of, as I said, Lorenzo Langstroth, who was the father of modern beekeeping, and he lived back then. So that's why. And when it comes to the Mongolia story, I can't yet spoil that because it's I'm not really talking about the actual theme and focus for the third novel yet, since it's not yet published. And the second novel, The End of the Ocean, is set in Norway today, and it goes back to the start of modern. We have a lot of hydroelectricity in Norway and big plants, so it's about that as well, about Norway, and so it's set in those years where that started to develop. Yeah. So I use actual events a lot, and I use history a lot, and I get my inspiration from that, and trying to make all the actual details as accurate as I can, and research and using consultants and reading and stuff like that is really important for me when I write. The books are they are definitely fiction, and a lot of people feel they are page turners. They need to read them really quick, but they are also filled with facts.
Maja, I'm going to take you back to the bees. So question number one is, what is the research actually telling us that is causing the colony collapse? You mentioned pesticides, but is there anything else? Then number two, if I may, humans are great problem solvers. So again, what is the research and the science doing to fix the colony collapse disorder?
Well, your second question, the answer to that is not nearly enough. Some researchers are now into drone bees, like, using technology to actually make robot bees, which I find really crazy. So they're solving this problem with making a gadget. It's just crazy.
Engineering solutions.
Yeah, engineering will not save us. But to your first, sorry, what was the first question?
What is colony collapse caused by?
It's caused by, they think it's several reasons. As I said, pesticides who destroys the brain of the bees, so they can't find their way back to the hive, is one thing. Another is stress, especially in countries where they have a very industrial farming going on. They drive their bees around. American farming, for example, is completely dependent on driving beehives around, millions of bees, taking from one place to the others. It's like it's oranges in Florida 1 month, and it's another fruit in California a second month. So the bees are only being moved from place to place all the time, and only 1 month they might have at the farm where they actually should stay. So they think stress is a part of it too. And there's also a lot of illnesses. Bees have a lot of different illnesses and a specific larva that can also hit them quite hard. So it's several reasons. And of course, global warming and climate changes is a big thing, because the bees, when the weather is changing all the time and is unpredictable, the bees are completely confused. They don't know which time of year it is. So they hate climate changes, they hate weather records, and they don't go out when it rains. So extreme rain is hard for them. Cold winter is really hard for them. Extreme heat is hard for them. So it's a complex picture.
Hi. Can I ask? I wanted to ask you, as a writer, do you find it difficult to juggle between fact and fiction, or do you enjoy the challenge?
I guess I enjoy the challenge, or else I wouldn't do it. And sometimes I can hate myself because it feels like I can't write a sentence without having to check something. But I also I'm sort of nerdy. I really like to learn, and it's so I guess it also drives me, learning more. And I really love novels where I learn something and also get a good story. So I guess that's why I write these kinds of novels myself too.
Question on the left.
Hello. You concentrate on commercial honeybees. I wonder if you touch at all upon all the other pollinators that are actually more effective at pollination than commercial honeybees.
That's a good question, and it's definitely part of the book too. It's not only the commercial bees that disappear, it's the pollinating insects. And we are the tame bees, the bees that are kept by beekeepers, are only a fragment of our pollinating insects. And the threat we see now is for all the insects. Bumblebees, for example, and a lot of other insects too that do pollinate. And there are also some plants have very specific insects that are the only ones that actually pollinate them, and especially these small species that are small groups, they are the ones that are disappearing rapidly, and we don't even have control over that because we don't focus on them, because it's just one small species, and they're only at this specific spot in the world. And that's worrying me even more. That's all those species that are just going away under the radar and no one actually cares about it. The world is getting poorer.
Would you like to ask? Can I ask? Okay. Hi. This is, this is my home, and if you look at the back, it's just all the trees are just full of bees. Now, what I want you to know is, my family has been here for 200 years, and we have a place in the village where we've been for 600 years. And every year we have these huge hives just coming into our homes and settling themselves. And though they inconvenience us, but we have a very religious connotation to the bee. So whenever they come and start setting up a hive, we will not disturb them. And we'll say it's Goddess Durga coming into our homes. Now, is it the same anywhere else in the world, or it's only confined to India?
The bee has a lot of mythology connected to it, and there are several stories about the bees in different mythologies. But I didn't know that. That's really beautiful, I think. It is.
If you ever have the time, I'll take you. There's a particular temple in our area, which is full of beehives. I mean, hundreds, huge ones, and no one disturbs them. And the little legend goes that if you go there with an impure mind, they will sting you. If you go there with a pure mind, they'll leave you alone. So, if you ever have the time, you're most welcome.
Thank you. Bees are very nice insects. They don't sting unless they are really threatened.
Hello. So as an aspiring biologist and also like part of the youthful generation, I love to learn about the news around me. And I don't know if you've incorporated this with your upcoming novel with water, but there's a concept called Day Zero, which all over the countries, that basically means that the cities themselves are running out of water. And my question, I guess, is how do you want the youth to attack these issues? And knowing about climate change, what should future generations attack and battle with?
What should future generations do about the fact that we're approaching Day Zero when there's going to be a massive water shortage?
Oh, that's a hard question, and it's a big question. And not only future generations, but we should all deal with this right away. And that's my message, to start today. We should have started 20 years ago, 30 years ago. We are way too late already. So, when it comes to water and lack of water, we all know we should spare our resources much harder than we do. But we should also, global warming is a big part of that. And drought and winters with no rain. So to stop global warming is probably the most important thing to do.
Just to say a little bit about your question in our context here, we are afflicted in so many ways by inappropriate use of water, by Himalayan water coming to the desert, for example, and actually ruining the ecology of the desert, because within 10 years you'll get salts rising and the land will become completely useless. So we actually have a crazy way of looking at, especially politically, crazy way of looking at water and looking at the way rivers run and looking at dams, which is just one of the huge problems here. But essentially, for speaking about India, the connections between forests and rivers and water is something that the politicians don't seem to understand, but ecologists are talking about and shouting from the rooftops about. So that's our big issue really here in this country now. But if we can wind up here, Maja, thank you so much for a very, very wonderful talk, and best of luck for the next 3 books. I hope they go really well.
Yes, we wish to thank, obviously, our wonderful author, Maja Lunde, in conversation with Pradip Krishen. We'd also like to say thank you to our presenting sponsor, Dyndic Bazaar. And I'm sorry there wasn't time for more questions. Please feel free to carry the discussions on afterwards. We would love to present you both with a scarf to say thank you for your time. And please note that the authors will now be going to the table at the top of the ramp to sign their books. You can continue conversations and buy their books then. And please help us, if you could, by taking your rubbish. There's a big bin right at the entrance. If you wouldn't mind just popping it in there, we would so appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much.